Good morning. Welcome to the morning's edition of the Richard Urban Show. We bring you news and views from God's point of view. Today we're very happy to have Danny Lutz Jr. on. He's the Mountain Party candidate for governor. He's on the ballot for the general election on November 3rd. So if you could please introduce yourself.
Well, good morning, all. I'm Danny Lutz, running for the governorship of West Virginia on the Mountain Party ticket. We're an affiliate of the Green Party of the United States. And the question probably in most people's minds, why run? Well, I'm going to steal a phrase from one of my dear friends who has since departed. His name is Carl Hess. He wrote this line for Barry Goldwater in 1964. I want to offer a choice, not an echo. I want to offer the people of West Virginia a plan that will enable them to enter the 21st century on a competitive basis. I'm not hearing that from any of the other candidates.
Okay. All right. So what would you say are your three of your main platform points that you would like to share?
Okay, my number one point is broadband. Until we have broadband accessible to everyone in West Virginia who wants it, we will not progress. I have been in touch with Intelsat and SpaceX, and they have assured me that 6 months from the date of an agreement, a contract, as they said, they could have a turnkey operation available to every West Virginian, every business, every church, every school, every organization that wants the broadband service. And I emphasize that adjective, turnkey. They said it would be ready to operate within 6 months. David Tabb and I discussed this with Bray Carey briefly back in January, on January 13th to be precise, and we have not heard anything back from the Justice Administration on this proposal. So if that had been implemented arbitrarily on February 1st, the children of West Virginia could have had, every one of them, but all we would have to have done was gotten them the laptop terminals. They could have had virtual access to everything internet on the face of the earth. In fact, as one of the vice presidents of Intelsat used the phrase, he said, working with SpaceX, we plan to cover every place on earth from Barclay Square to Pitcairn Island where they want internet service. That's the first point. The second point is,
could I ask one thing
West
about that?
Virginia. Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, definitely, you'll definitely have plenty of time
Go ahead.
for all the other points. Well, the satellite traditionally, I know you're talking about, I think you mentioned it's 5G, right? Satellite is like snail slow. And I was reading maybe this isn't quite ready yet. Or would it really work, I guess, as I'm saying? Is that technology really available?
Well, yes, according to Intelsat, they are doing this in Croatia right now, which has some of the similar problems that West Virginia faces. Very rugged terrain, people with not a high income. And last month, SpaceX launched 597 communication satellites in one launch into low Earth orbit above the Earth. Now, low Earth means from 700 to 1,100 kilometers above the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The geosynchronous satellites that are being used now are as much as 22,000 miles above the Earth. That's a tenth of the way to the moon. SpaceX plans at least 5 more such launches before the end of the year. And discussing facts and figures on this program, Intelsat says this turnkey operation that we discussed can be in operation for between $150 million and $200 million. Now, that is a third of what Mr. Justice was speaking of week before last. And the point being, if I am governor, the $150 million that's planning to be wasted on rock wool will be diverted to the internet program.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think there's also concern for safety studies on 5G, like effect on, various things like cancer and stuff. Is there any concern about that?
Yes, and well, yes, there is. And I've spoken with the engineers. These are engineering vice presidents, I might add, and they have said that for those who desire it, they will be able to offer 4G. So I think it's going to be a real smorgasbord of internet options that are finally available when Intelsat and SpaceX get Starlink in operation.
Mhm. Okay. All right. Well, all right. That's an interesting proposal. I mean, I know there's concern about, and that many people aren't connected. Like I'm in Shannondale here. We're fortunate, I feel. Some people might not be a big fan of Comcast, but it does have high-speed internet, so we have a good service. But I know that's not true for many, many places.
Well, for instance, here in Jefferson County, if people are getting 25 to 30 megabits download speed, that's considered good. I don't even get that here in the valley. You go across the state line just a few hundred yards from your home, and they're getting 30 gigabits download speed. We can't progress with that kind of a gap in communications.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to those. Yeah, there's definitely some need for a better service in the non-connected areas. That's
Okay.
true. So let's go on to the second or third
Okay.
point you can share.
Second point. Okay. A second point, and it can be summed up in one word: water. Most people don't think about it, but West Virginia is the birthplace of most of the rivers in the east, that is, east of the Western Continental Divide. We supply some of the water for ourselves, the District of Columbia, and parts of 12 other states. That is a mandate to stewardship. We have got to assure that the water that leaves West Virginia is as clean as when it came out of the earth, because water is life. And with that, I've also got a program that I would like to implement. It would be a pollution control credit system.
Yeah,
Before
I was noticing
anyone
that. Go
can
ahead.
discharge, before anyone can discharge any contaminant into the air, the water, or the soil, they have to get a credit for a certain amount of that. Now, the state of West Virginia will create these credits under my program, and then they will be distributed to each household in West Virginia where there is a registered voter. And then it will be up to the entity desiring to discharge the pollution or contaminant to purchase these credits for the best deal they can make. The households could hold the credit, they could sell the credit, they could swap the credit for something they want, they could trade it, whatever the best deal is they could make. My opinion is that each of these credits should be worth between $2,500 and $4,500 a piece. So if a household had only 10 credits, that could be as much as a $25,000 income boost. And seeing how 45% of the people of West Virginia, for whatever the reason, do not work, this would be an annual income supplement, not a guaranteed annual income, not a welfare program. This is pure capitalism. That is, the households have a good that the that the industrial users need, and they make the best deal they can for it. You can't get purer capitalism than that, and it would be something I think that other states would implement. California is doing a modified version of this, and Virginia is looking at a modified version, especially with regard to carbon dioxide. In addition to firms like Rockwool, fracking companies would be required to purchase these credits before they could discharge or inject their wastewater. Just keep naming
Yeah,
sewage waste and other
that sounds
storage
like a possible
and
idea.
contaminant.
It's kind of like a tax on pollution. Something like that.
Well, I have avoided the word tax because that seems to be a non-starter. However, and especially taxes are something that's anti-capitalist, and this is a pure capitalist proposal. That is a good and a user, and they get together, and it is not, and the money to the household is not welfare; it's income.
Okay.
So
well, let me ask. Yeah.
I prefer to avoid the term tax.
Yeah, about the rock wool. I noticed, I think, if I correct me if I'm wrong, one of the methods they'll be allowed to dispose of waste is to inject water and waste into karst or sinkholes, or am I wrong? And that seems a little crazy, or doesn't that get into the groundwater? Or correct me, am I misunderstanding something?
Sinkhole, and as a conservation district supervisor, I've been very in tune to this. Sinkholes are the fastest way from the clouds to the aquifers. That is, in the Great Plains, it takes a while for the rainwater and the contaminated water to percolate through the soils to get down to the aquifers. Here, it could be in a matter of hours because when you see these limestone outcrops, the water hits that stone and it percolates right down on the outside of the stone, dissolving some of the calcium carbonate, taking it with it, right down to the aquifer. And sooner or later, when enough soil or is moved from one place to another, the structure of the soils and the stone weakens, and you get a sinkhole. We've had them deep enough here to swallow tractors.
Yeah.
So yes, Rockwool is looking at using a Class 5 injection wells, is what the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection calls them.
Does that actually involve sinkholes?
Well, it can. They can get a sinkhole designated as a Class 5 injection well by declaring that half, that is 50% of everything that goes into that injection well is water, is stormwater. Now, the stormwater can contain anything from mud to radioactive waste, but as long as it's less than 50%, it can go into it.
It does sounds like a stupid policy, or am I missing something? Why do they even allow any injection into the aquifer?
You're not missing a thing, because what we're looking at is the possible contamination of the water supplies for several million people.
Yeah, that sounds like a bad deal. That needs to not happen. I mean, I'm not sure
what the earlier, we
proper. Go ahead.
Well, the proper way to handle things like this, if you make the waste, you take care of it on site. The days when we can dump on our neighbors are gone. I can't think of anyone who would want their neighbor dumping their garbage on their lawn after they've taken some steps to have a nice home and grounds and such. So why should Rockwool be allowed to dump their waste on the rest of us?
Yeah, I agree.
Can't think of a single good reason.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I agree with you on that one. Definitely. Okay. Well, you wanted to mention another point, right? Your third main issue you're thinking about.
Well, another point that I have that I want to develop involves the coal industry. We have West Virginia has coal, and we have it. It's not in the abundance that we used to have it, but we have, in addition to the coal, we have some of the largest recoverable deposits of rare earth elements in North America. And that's the elements between element number 57 and 71. And they are used in all kinds of high technological applications for, you name it. We can recover these, and they're worth, some of them are worth as much as $70,000 a kilogram. Yet they're in the shales that are on top of the coal that's being stripped off. They're in the coal itself, and they're in the shale deposits that are beneath the coal. And those tailings just have been pushed into ravines, smoothed over, and patched up called reclamation. The coal ash and the gob piles go just around waste piles. We have
What's
a
gob?
fortune in
Can you tell me
these
what
rare
gob
earth
is?
elements we can recover. Gob piles are the waste from washing and cleaning the coal before it's shipped for resale. That's the term that the people call them, gob piles.
So if
that's
this rare earth elements,
we
has it been successfully extracted? Is it cost effective?
Yes, it is very cost effective. We are obtaining these elements right now from China and Afghanistan, two nations that don't exactly bear us goodwill.
Right.
Now, for instance, you have a CAT scan. The machinery you're using employs at least 4 of these elements in small quantities. The cell phone you have employs these. There's many of the magnets have dysprosium in them, which makes them much more adhering magnets and stronger fields. Thousands of uses, and plus coal also has a fantastic future because of the applications that involve carbon. Coal's best use no longer is in being burned to create heat. For instance, there's a product that was developed by our Buckminster Fuller that properly called fullerenes. Some people call them buckyballs. These are an isotope of carbon, can come from coal, that is from anywhere from 25 to 100 times as viscous in its lubricating power as motor oil. So West Virginia has a bright future with the resources we have. We've just got to, like the old insurance line comes down and says, you're going to earn a fortune and some of it should be yours to keep. Some of the value of the wealth beneath our feet should be ours to keep. And that's what I would like to see done. Something else along this line, mechanization is coming in leaps and bounds. I was reading an article in yesterday's Washington Post about with the COVID-19 problem that a lot of the firms are looking at robots to do the cleaning instead of people. They're saying that some of the robot cleaners can do it a third as fast as a human person doing the cleaning. Well, if a company employs a machine to replace one or more people, why shouldn't they contribute a portion of the savings that they're going to realize to help to retrain these people to do something else, to assure that they can have medical and health care, B, to assure that they do not have to choose between whether to put food on the table for their families or to buy prescriptions to cure their ills. This is something we've got to consider, because once again, going back to that figure, that's the last one I had, 45% of West Virginians do not work, whether it's because they're disabled, whether because they're unemployed, or because they're on Social Security or have retired, whatever.
Could I interject? How does that compare to? Oh, sorry. How does it compare to other states? What's the typical? Because I know some people are retired.
We are the highest percentage, I am told, of any of the states. However, we are the bellwether because it's going to happen in other states. Ohio is probably a close second to us in the number of people who are not working for whatever the reason. And this is not to disparage people that are not working. The days of a lifetime career are probably behind us. So most people coming along can anticipate a period in their lives in which they will not be working or producing or something other than perhaps for themselves.
Okay. All right. Well,
this has to be accommodated.
Okay. You mentioned COVID. I want to ask you about that. So we've seen a lot of mandates from the governor. In fact, we're still under I believe it's the March or April mandate, safer at home, whatever it is. And then, you're supposed to wear a mask if you're not able to social distance, and a lot of businesses have picked up on that. Question. So do you think these kind of mandates are justified? Should they be time limited? You know, as governor, like I know in Wisconsin, although the governor has made a second mandate, it ran out after 60 days. It seems like we have infinite mandates. Or what's your take on everything that's going on?
Well, at the moment, what we have right now is probably the best we can get because we didn't have any mechanism for dealing with things like this back in the wintertime when this first hit. Now, I heard for my part, I heard about this for the first time in October of last year. And that was from two friends who are professors at the Harbin University in China. And they told me about it in an email that there was a serious virus problem, and that fortunately it was about 600 kilometers away from them. So, not that was a whole lot of lead time for which to prepare. So, what I would like to see done for COVID, as best we can, and for other pandemics that will be coming, I don't think this is the last one we're going to see. I would like to recreate an equivalent to what used to be the Civil Defense Program for West Virginia. Now, I don't want to go back to duck and cover drills and stuff like that and having signs up on the highways saying, in the event of an enemy attack, this highway may be closed to all, but military traffic, etc. I don't want to go back to that. But what I want to go to is to a civil defense program that will inventory our resources so that we have stockpiles of food, stockpiles of potable water, excuse me, and medical supplies for basic medical needs, and have them within 30 minutes of any West Virginian, and have a program developed to deal on as these pandemics arise, and I think there's going to be more of them. I don't think we've seen the last of COVID because it appears to have a fantastic replicating ability, and it could even mutate into something we haven't anticipated yet. So I'd like to see that kind of a program developed whereby it wouldn't be just say stay in your house and wear a mask. I'd like to see it would involve a healthcare program, that is a health services program that would enable people to get the health service they need and to get the instructions for coping with such organisms as they need them and in a timely fashion and in a usable way.
Well, wouldn't that fall
Color
more
coding a map tells us what we already. Beg your pardon?
I was saying, wouldn't that fall more to individual responsibility? Like you mentioned, having stockpiles of food and water. So isn't that something that like households should do themselves?
Well, that's fine to say they should do it themselves, but for instance, every school in West Virginia has a school nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that the students are there, that is, someone is at the school perhaps 10 hours out of 24. Suppose we used places like the schools as stockpile locations for these food supplies and water and medical supplies, so that we can mobilize those upon need, the identification of a need. Although I agree with you that people should take care of their own needs, I know people who in this area who, when the last 3 or 4 days of the month come along, they don't have a scrap of food in the house. Now, that could be cured by education, but once again, that takes time, and some people would starve before they could be educated, unfortunately. So there is an obligation to at least make the service available. Now, if people want to take advantage of it, fine. If they don't, well, we're really not in a position to make them. So
Right.
we've got to have the mechanism in place for people to use.
Okay.
As
Yeah,
I say, it's important to me able to say that no one should be further than 30 minutes from a hot meal, a safe glass of water, and medical attention.
Okay, fair enough. So on the point you mentioned about force field do things, one issue I've been working on is our forced vaccination system. As you know, like West Virginia was one of only 2 states where they have the policy, no, no vaccine, no full vaccination, no school, no exceptions, except for extremely hard to get medical exemptions, which is only like 100 a year, if that, granted. So point being, a few other states have now adopted that, as you know, like New York State and California, unfortunately. But is that a good policy? Shouldn't people have freedom to choose before they're forced to like inject dangerous substances? What's your take on that?
Well, I'm torn. I'd like to share with you an anecdote, if you will, from my own experience. In 1955, the Salk vaccine for polio came out.
Okay.
And 2 years later, in the Jefferson County school system, they had a program where they bussed all the students into what was then the county building on the corner of Congress and George Streets, and they got a polio vaccination. I think it was a 3-shot type. Well, my mother had heard about the what turned out to be a bad batch of the Salk vaccine, which had caused polio. So she wouldn't let my sister and me take the Salk vaccine.
Right.
So I don't know whether that saved me from getting polio or not. But none of the probably was not it probably wasn't an issue because none of the students with whom I was in school came down with polio. And then 7 years later, when the Sabin live vaccine came on, that they called the serum on sugar,
Right.
we did take that because that had been tested and was proven. Where, for instance, it's a disease like smallpox has pretty well been eradicated from the earth because of vaccination. And
well, there's some
whereas
debate about
300
that,
years ago, well, as
meaning
I have
not
not,
that it
the last,
doesn't have any effect, but that the vaccine, most diseases, even like smallpox, some places use quarantine, like Leicester, if I pronounce it correctly, England, and they were successful using other methods, and that many diseases like diphtheria, the incidence, and even measles, the incidence of disease had gone down more than 90% before the vaccine is introduced. So it's not a like A and B thing. It's like because of improvements of sanitation, like no more horse manure in the streets and things like that, even before vaccines were introduced, a lot of the diseases had decreased. So to just say, oh, it's because the vaccine is over simple. That's what I'm saying. But anyway, go ahead.
well, it could, yeah, you could have a point there. For instance, using the smallpox example, most farm people did not get smallpox before the days of the Jenner vaccine, the Jenner smallpox vaccine, because they were around cows, and cows would get what was called cowpox,
Right.
and people got that from the cows, and it immunized them against smallpox. So are there ways to immunize? Probably. Would I advocate everybody being rubbing shoulders with a cow to become immunized against smallpox? I don't think that would be a good thing, whether for the person or the cows. But the point is that for the various health programs have pretty well eradicated smallpox from the earth. And
yeah. Well, to
another
simplify
example that we use.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I was gonna say, to
Well,
shorten
another
it a
example.
little. Well, would you, in a nutshell, like allow people to have exemptions for religious or conscientious reasons. That would be a simple thing.
Well, I would at least yes, I would allow the consideration of conscientious religious objection to vaccines.
Okay.
But once again, I would also like to keep track of the people who, and of course, the health departments would have these records. Keep track of the people who have made such and received such an exemption, so that if a disease should break out among these people or a community where these people reside, that we could get the handle on it. I
Guys,
would not want to see, uh, for instance, if somebody comes in from Lower Slobovia and has smallpox, and a group of school children were exempted for religious reasons, I would not want to see them infected with smallpox because they weren't immunized. So I'd want to have a way to keep track on it, and so we could, as you were talking about the British example, quarantine and isolate. This is part of my civil defense program that I'm advocating, is to be able to keep track of what kind of problems we're dealing with, when we can expect to deal with them, and a mechanism for getting the word out to the public.
okay. Yeah, speaking of quarantine.
Reliable to get.
Yeah. No, you're
Yes,
right.
because quarantine is still one of the most effective ways to control disease.
Right, but I was
The
going to
trouble
say
is the way it's implemented.
you don't traditionally quarantine well people, which is kind of the unusual thing about the whole COVID thing. Yeah. In fact, I was checking recently, I wrote an editorial about if you're under age 44, the infection fatality rate is 0.01%, which is, if I do my math right, is a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying. Well, that's about the same as the chance of dying in an automobile accident. So it seems to me that things have been way skewed out of reality. Like, is there a reason children can't go to school right now?
Quite frankly, I don't know. I don't know what to believe about the COVID, because especially from the national level, so many incorrect things have been said. I got better information from my two friends in China about COVID than I have from the government in Washington. I don't like that. It bothers me that we can't that we can't get reliable information, and it bothers me more that we do not have a way of dispensing the information and the health care that we need, that's needed when it is needed and where it is needed. This is where the United States has trailed the world. The Europeans did a far better job on COVID, with some exceptions, than we did. I communicated back and forth with my two friends. Harbin shut down their classes, and you had to have something of a, I don't especially like it, but you had to have something of some kind of a permit to go out, and you could only go out 2 or 3 times a week from your apartment in China. And
Right. Well,
I can't imagine many Americans accepting that well, but that was the way they did it. But at least the information that they got, that is from Bob and Joyce gave me, at least it appears reliable. I can't say the same thing, because I was hearing one story on Monday, and then Wednesday it was being countermanded. What do
well, I
you
wouldn't call the
believe?
Chinese data
I'm trying to
reliable, but
remember
I
who it
agree with
was.
you that the statistics, like from the Information for Health Statistics, which is like Bill Gates funded thing in Washington, they were fantastically wrong. Totally, completely wrong. And many, many others too. Yeah, I
Well,
agree with on
I'm
that.
trying to remember who said it during the Reagan administration, that he said to the effect, "We will know we have succeeded with disinformation when everything the American public believes is false." And
I think that
I've been thinking about that all this year.
I think to wind this
And
part of the
it
discussion,
bothers me.
yeah, no, it's true, is that what we should be looking at is the excess mortality. And I believe that it has been declining, and we'll see in the next weeks to month, you know, if it keeps declining to near regular levels, you know, the so-called excess mortality, because that'll give us a better handle than all these numbers, because there's so many like inaccuracies with recording deaths and all those kind of things. Yeah, I think.
And also with the onset of cold weather, I will be curious to see where where like back in February and March, where we had more people confined in centrally heated spaces, whether we have the same kind of upticks in the COVID-19 that we had back in late February, March, and through April, or if it actually declines. I am hoping it's going to decline, but I plain don't know. And I'm also concerned about the flu. That is, we're coming into the flu season.
Right.
And of course, the flu shots are being dispensed now. And then I've asked my friends in China to keep me posted on it. There is a new strain of swine flu that has emerged in the Chinese swine population, and it has been shown to be transmissible to humans. Now, how virulent it is, I have not been able to get information on. That concerns me because
Right.
if we have another pandemic on top of COVID, on top of influenza, Katie, bar the door.
Well, one thing, yeah, to kind of wind this discussion down, but there's a lot of conflicts with the big pharma. So the flu shot, the fact is, like there was this huge study done in 2005, but that was showed like no benefit of the flu shots in reducing mortality. And in fact, even though the CDC pushes it, it doesn't reduce mortality. And on top of that, it's the second worst vaccine for adverse reactions next to HPV. But so I think, yeah, I think how do you say, what's promoted and what reality is are two different things, but I think more people are becoming aware of those discrepancies.
Well, for using myself as an example, I get the flu shot each year through the VA. And I can't say that it has kept me from getting the flu, but I know that and also I being 71, I guess I have certain acquired immunities that may be helping, but I have had fewer rhinoviruses and fewer respiratory infections in the last 10 years that I've been taking the flu vaccine than I had experienced in earlier times in my life. So um, once again, that's not empirical data by any stretch
Right.
of the imagination, but it's my own observation.
Okay. Yeah. So all right. Yeah. So as governor, would you like promote having, to get back to that question, time limits on these kind of mandates, or you think that the way it is now is fine? Like,
Okay, as governor,
sorry.
and as governor, I realize I know enough about this to get into trouble. I would be surrounding myself with the best expertise I could, and if they said it's time to cut it out, then we would cut it out. If they say, hey, you're going to have to continue this another 6 months, then that's what I would do. It's the same way with education. I know enough about education and education theory to get into trouble. So I would be relying upon the people who have made a lifetime study of education to tell me what's the best thing to do. There's certain things that I can do fairly well, but a lot of things I've got to rely upon good information, and heaven help the person who gives me bad information.
Okay, so it sounds similar to what's going on now. I did want to ask about a question that's close to my heart, and that is, you know, do you think that in teaching sexual health education, that abstinence, meaning, you know, abstinence from sex before marriage, should that be the expected standard for school-age children?
Okay, first off, I would the sex education be unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
I would that each household teach their children responsible sexual behavior. Do I believe that's going to happen in the near future? No, I do not. Uh, I do not. And I also do not feel good about the households who say, "Well, they ought to learn that in the schools." No, they should learn it in the homes, and I would like that.
That's true.
Abstinence is 100. Abstinence is 100% effective in preventing pregnancy. There ain't no doubt about that. Um, do we have the deviants running around and the perverts and the rapists? Yes, we do. And I don't want that either. And in fact, goes to another area. This is why I would reserve prisons for those people who are simply too incorrigible or too far gone to be able to be allowed to function in society. Now, that's whether that includes rapists, muggers, murderers, you name it. I do not want any woman to have to be in fear of her safety because she has to go out at night or through a particular neighborhood. We've got to find a way to assure that. And this is where teaching responsible behavior, whether it's through sexual abstinence or sexual behavior, whether it is uh, controlling violent inclinations, whether it's controlling a big mouth, regardless of which sex it happens to come from. These are the things that we've got to learn again as a society. We've got to become a community again, and that will take care of a lot of these problems. Because if abstinence is expected in a community, then that's what you will get. If it's not, you won't.
Well, you
So
make a good point
I
there.
want I want the whole I want the schools to do their job. I want the homes to do their jobs. And that's something else. We've got to return and this is one thing my pollution control credit system will help to do to assure incomes. We've got to have a family unit in the home. That is, where both parents have to be out working. You have latchkey kids is a prescription for trouble. We have got to be a community again. Um, you and I grew up in the time when you could earn a living in a town like Charlestown or Ranson and be at home when the kids got home from school and that sort of thing. And this is something broadband will do for us. It will enable people who have those kinds of skills to work from home and to be part of their children's lives. Whereas instead of spending, like some people I know, 4 hours each way commuting to Washington to work, and then a kid, get out of my face, I'm tired, I don't have time for you. That we can't have. We've got to find a way to get around that, because that's a prescription for disaster. So I really rambled on that question.
That's okay. Yeah, I
So
noticed
there's so
kind
many
of probably we're
facets to
about
it.
time to wind things down, and I'll definitely give you the chance to share any final thoughts. I noticed that the mountain party, for instance, it's for you're talking about the family, but like I noticed they're saying they're for the LGBTQ equality and these kind of things. So are you okay with that?
Oh,
I mean,
you, oh, you, yes, you probably won't be able to put this on the air this way, but the way most of us in the Mountain Party feel, what two consenting adults do inside their own four walls between their eyebrows and their kneecaps is strictly between them. Don't take
okay.
it outside and ram it down somebody else's throat. Uh, and don't inculcate it into children unless it's their lifestyle when they are eligible, when they're old enough to understand and eligible and able to choose. But uh, it's an individual liberty thing there as far as we're concerned. Between the
Yeah.
eyebrows and the kneecaps and inside four walls, we're not going to dictate that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, in some sense, I agree with that. I mean, those kind of things. But those things also affect society profoundly in the sense that, as we know, there are states where, you know, the examples where people are fined because they won't, you know, have a problem with baking a cake or doing photography for a same-sex wedding. So there are those areas where it gets out into society, and then where the state can, and in some states does, force people to say, oh, no, no, you don't like to serve that clientele, sorry, you must. So you get into that area, you know what I mean?
I see where you're coming from, and if I could play dictator, we might have fewer lawyers litigating such cases, because if I walk into and I am heterosexual, I might add, but if I was homosexual and I walk into a bakery and order a wedding cake and tell them that I want 2 male figures on top of it, they say I can't do that. I'd just walk out the door. It's not worth the fight. It's
Right.
not worth it's not worth taking up public resources to litigate something like that. It is not worth the aggravation and the heartache that it's going to cause a number of people in a particular incident. What's wrong with simply walking away from what you don't like, unless it's going to physically harm you? Uh, that I'm taking that position with a lot of things. That's why I'm hard on pollution, but soft on individual liberties. Let people live their lives as they want to, but don't put smoke down their throat.
Yeah, right. I
Did
mean,
that help?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think so. But though we're seeing those things increasingly more becoming problematic. I mean, I agree with you in the sense like, yeah, it's not really the government's business what I do in my home. But in the case, but the fact of the matter, reality is there are definitely strong agendas where the agenda clearly is, you know, to force people to accept that viewpoint, you know, like personally, I believe in marriage between a man and woman, but I'm not, you know, for the police busting into someone's home because they're doing something. On the one hand, I agree with you on that, but I'm also not for the other extreme where it's saying you must accept this. We're telling you, you know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, and I didn't mean to say I was trying to force anyone to accept someone else's behavior, but the example of the bakery, if I walk in there not knowing and I encounter that attitude, it's better just to walk away. But I mean,
Absolutely.
what Jesus said, put the distance behind you,
Yeah. Okay. Well, we
shake the
could
dust
cover.
from your feet.
Yeah.
From your feet.
Yeah, no, we got covered a lot of things. I want to give you just a chance to conclude or share why the voters should choose you on November 3rd, and any other like final thoughts.
Well, okay, just a couple of thoughts. As I opened with the quote from the late Carl Hess, the reason the voters should look to me is I want to offer you a choice, not an echo. My other opponents are talking about the same, basically just a repackaged version of the same issues and the same responses over and over again. I am the only candidate who has taken a position in favor of repealing the Workplace Freedom Act and restoring federal prevailing wage, because we have got to have a mechanism by which our incomes at least begin to catch up with our costs of living. This is especially here in the Eastern Panhandle, is a serious problem. Again, there in 2016, I know a lot of people who couldn't stand Hillary Clinton and couldn't stand Donald Trump, so they stayed home. And it affected all the other races down the ballot. Well, my reason for running, I can't afford to run for president. And I ran for governor. I was asked to run for governor because I want to offer the people who are not thrilled with Mr. Justice or Mr. Salango, there's nothing personal against them, but like myself, who simply can't vote for them, I want them to at least have a name by which they can put a mark on the ballot or punch a card and have a choice, at least have a choice in who is going to be their chief executive. The governor of a state like West Virginia is a promoter for West Virginia and an advocate to the national level, along with the representatives and senators. Also, the governor of West Virginia in the state sets the tone for what the programs are going to be. And my program is, all of my programs are oriented toward bringing West Virginia into the 21st century. And that is because I want to see us competing with states like California and New York and Virginia and Ohio, instead of being of this famous phrase, boy, thank God for Mississippi or we'd be dead last. We've got to stop thinking like that. We are better than that. As a matter of fact, I use the phrase from General Harry Bandholtz following the Battle of Blair Mountain when he was asked by a lawyer in the treason trial. It says, what is your impression of the people of West Virginia that you encountered? General Bandholtz said on the stand, they're a damn sight better than they know. That is true. West Virginians are a damn sight better than they know. Now let's be that.
Okay. Yeah. So just to clarify one thing, the Workplace Freedom Act repeal, does that mean you're against right to work, or is that what it's about?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
So you prefer the yeah. So my understanding then you would be preferred like workplaces. How do you say not workplaces? Yeah, union membership can be dictated. Is that part of the repeal? Right?
No,
it's not.
Because no, sir. The federal government takes care of that. The closed shop was outlawed in the 1930s. Now there are shops that have union contracts where a person can come in and go to work, and they have a certain time to decide whether to affiliate with the union or not. That's fine with me. But for someone to come in and say, "Well, I'm going to take the benefits because I'm coming here to work because I can get 4 weeks of paid vacation, and I'm getting $5 more per hour, and I'm getting full dental, vision, and health care coverage, and I'm not going to pay a nickel of union dues." That's wrong. I can't tolerate a free rider.
I see. Okay, probably take a while to go through the different.
I come from a farm background. Everybody pulls his weight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought they still had to pay for some of the benefits. If you have right to work, I thought you still had to pay some of it, but you wouldn't be required to pay the part that might go to political lobbying or stuff like that. Or am I wrong about that?
Well, it depends upon exactly how the courts rule on the Workplace Freedom Act here in West Virginia. It's still being litigated on appeal. So we'll have to see how that shakes out.
All right. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure. I know we could go on and on, but in the interest of time, but I really do appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much.
And sharing, and we'll make this available on video.
I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay, I'm Richard Urban.
And live long and prosper.
Yes. So thank you for joining us today with our interview with Mr. Lutz for Governor, and we will see you next time.